welcome. Thanks for joining us on VIFF Connect. My name's Ellen Hadley, and I'm the Senior Marketing Manager here at the Vancouver International Film Festival. I'd like to start tonight by giving thanks to the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations for their continued stewardship of the unceded and occupied land on which we live and work. This event is part of our VIFF Talks program, presented by our wonderful partner, Creative BC. Tonight's conversation is part of our Creator Talk series, which draws from a finely curated group of showrunners, directors, writers, producers, and craftspeople behind some of the most critically acclaimed films and TV series. Our guests provide a treasure trove of information and inspiration for fellow creators, filmmakers, industry professionals, and of course, the fans. Tonight, we are very excited to have two of the key creatives behind the hit series, The Wilds. Creator and executive producer Sarah Streicher, and showrunner and executive producer Amy Harris. Sarah and Amy join us to share a closer look at how they and a production team made up of predominantly women created the addictive, adrenaline-laced cocktail of drama, mystery, and tension that is The Wilds. A heads up that we've allotted some time at the end of the talk for an audience Q&A, so drop your questions in the chat at any time and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. And now, I'd like to pass it over to our wonderful host for this evening, writer and producer, Joanna Taha. Welcome, Sarah, Amy, and Joanna.
Hi, I am Joanna Taha. I'm a television writer and producer, and I am thrilled to be hosting this Creator Talk. We are incredibly lucky to be able to talk about the hugely popular Amazon series, The Wilds, which I would wager that the vast majority of us binged in a single session. So I'd like to introduce creator Sarah Streicher and showrunner Amy Harris.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Oh,
we can't hear any applause, but just assume that it's happening. So I'm so excited to dig into season 1 of The Wilds, and needless to say, spoilers for season 1 abound for this point. But this was such a fun ride to dig into and to watch. And you watch a show, you get the idea, okay, there's a bunch of characters. I will see who's my favorite. I'll see who appeals to me. I did not expect the thing that endeared me to a certain character to be a flipper. For those of you who don't know or haven't had the pleasure, the flipper is Shelby's appliance that she wears that has the teeth on it. And I was shocked because I had never known anybody else to have this very unpleasant experience. Which of you or who in the writer's room shared this deep wound from their soul?
That would be myself. I was congenitally born without eye teeth, adult eye teeth. So after the baby teeth fell out, I had to wear a flipper until I matured enough to get a permanent solution, which I chose like 2 bridges. But it was for my most formative, tender, and those years when you are most concerned with how you look and how you're presenting yourself. I was saddled with having to take this flipper out whenever I ate. So there was a lot of scuttling of the flipper into a napkin at school lunches, and a lot of laughing like this, and was very has always been in my consciousness ever since.
Been there, it fell on my face, front flipper for many years. So I feel you. True story. And, sometimes they break when you're at a bar with your friends, but it's not about me. I assume that was not the entire germ of this idea. Tell us just a little bit about why this show was the show you wanted to write.
Well, first of all, Joanna, I'm just grateful. We are in the sisterhood of the flipper wearers, and I salute you. Yeah, I mean, and of course the flipper stands in for so much more. For Shelby, it's this imperfect piece that actually symbolizes her greater feeling of imperfection and tied to her sexual identity and the questioning of that. But in terms of the show itself, a while ago, prior to the writing of the show, I had been broken up with, and it was a kind of a very grisly experience. I felt very mishandled. My heart was mishandled. And it sent me into this emotional tailspin, the likes of which I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. There's really all of these very teenage feelings, stereotypically teenage feelings, like resurged. And I was like calling my mother, and I was like crying to her on the phone, and I was listening to like the saddest, weepiest songs on repeat, just wanting to feel it deeper and deeper and sink into that, like into that despair and hurt. I just really, it inspired me to want to revisit that time in my life, and to explore it with a little bit of distance that I have now, and to reframe those feelings that we so often disparage, like that, those like teenage drama, you're being dramatic, or you're feeling too much. I wanted to reframe those as really like normal, and B, beautiful. They're so revelatory. You discover things about yourself when you're in the throes of that intense feeling. So I was just called to write about adolescent, coming of age teenage women, and eventually found myself wanting to draw a parallel between the intensity of feeling that you experience just as a normal teenager and the intensity of a survival situation. Because in both cases, it's really extreme. It's life or death. It is intense. It is overwhelming. But it is also, we go through it, and it's such a worthy experience.
You said teenage drama in a bit of a tone that I want to come back to, because I suspect that is somebody's voice, or somebody's voice. But I wanted to ask then, Amy, tell us about the process of the two of you meeting. These kind of work relationships are often like a marriage, an arranged marriage. Did you meet and then read the show and know that would work, or did you connect with something in particular? What was the process there for you?
Sure. So Jamie Tarsis, who actually passed this past January, I guess, was one of my best friends and a collaborator who I'd worked with many times. And she had read Sarah's script and fallen in love with it and pushed really hard to be the person to produce it. They shot the pilot together. And Jamie's very savvy and smart. She said, I have this thing. I think you might dig it. The woman who wrote it, it's a genius and wrote this beautiful script, hasn't done this a lot before, so needs someone to help guide her. Read it. If you like it, great. If you don't, it's cool. She was always very good about not being like, you have to do this, or so. Of course, I was immediately intrigued because she was making it seem very casual, and Jamie's
soft sell,
and she's very passionate, and really intensely loves her projects. And so I was like, okay, I'll read it, and if there's a cut, I'd like to see it. And I read the script and I was really blown away. And I said, okay, I want to see the cut, because I don't want to, waste your time if I don't think this is something I could jump into and be excited about. But I knew I loved the script. So then I was just like, I hope they cast it well. And I watched the pilot, and that cast is just gorgeous and talented and deep. And I just fell in love with the way it was shot and what was coming. And Sarah and I sat down, and I think they were mid-cut and recutting it and shifting things. And we had an hour. I remember she was wearing were you wearing your Marine sweatshirt?
Oh, yeah, perhaps. It's my favorite sweatshirt, probably.
Yeah, it's her favorite sweatshirt, but sort of unnerving, because I was like, that's sort of surprising and not what I expected based on the script, which I really like too, that she isn't one thing, because I don't think any of us are one thing. And we just hit it up. And my whole thing is I've created my own things, but when I've run shows, it's like my job is to help the creator's vision land on the screen and on the page and in the writer's room. And I just felt like Sarah and I had very similar ideas about the fact that there's a lot of humor, even in the darkest of places. And that we were really in sync, but also could bring different things to the table each day in the creative process. And yeah, so I hopped on, and it's not exactly, it's always never exactly what you expect, but it's sort of everything that I'd hoped for in terms of the collaboration. Because you can get into collaborations where it really doesn't feel like a match, and those arranged marriages get very uncomfortable. Or challenging in ways that are too much. But this one really, from day one, just felt like a terrific partnership. Sarah may tell you that's not true. So, but maybe she won't tell you now. I don't know.
It's funny. Amy and I, when we talk about character and story, we get deep into the feelings, and we only care about emotion and the emotional thrust of scenes. But I think actually ourselves personally, we're not great at talking about how we feel about each other. So it's often on these public forums when I'm like, oh my God, I love this woman so much. And I start to melt down. But anyway.
There's just a third party going, just extract all your inner feelings, please, if you could.
Totally, you're like a couples counselor, but we don't need counseling to get us through problems. We need it to tell us how much we adore one another. So
let it all out and be free, Would you say, outside of the confines of a showrunner role or a creator role, that one of you is more, one is more towards like, I like the messy stories, or I focus more on the humor? Or is there anything that you'd say, is the balance between you in terms of working and leading the creative team, maybe tonally, just to put you all the way on the spot?
Yeah, I think tonally we're kind of intrigued by similar things. We always call the show sort of a dystopic slumber party, in the sense that like slumber parties can go horribly awry and deep drama and trauma can happen, but they can also be really funny and light and the silliest of conversations. I would say Sarah's has, and this is not even true totally, because it's not, I shouldn't dismiss any of the other parts, because she's unbelievably good at story and there's not enough drive, and this feels like a repeat beat, but she'll have like an inkling of something that is really off to the left that this is my left, but it's probably on the right. Sorry guys. So I think I'm mirrored. Anyway, that is often something I wouldn't necessarily think of, but always is something that really excites me. So I think she has more left field thoughts maybe than I have, but every now and again I'll come up with something super weird too. So I don't know. We both like the weird surprise, like the Martha Dream sequence in the first season, or Marcus being the man that shows up in their lives in the mannequin. Like, those are things we both kind of dig finding.
Well, you couldn't have set this up better if you tried. I'd like to roll our first clip, if we could, talking about the swinging from delightful sleepover to dystopian drama. If we could see that clip, please. We'll come back after that.
Oh shit! Jesus. What is this? You okay? What the fuck is taking me down? Here. Rachel, calm down. Dot is sucking me in. Don't Dot it. What is happening? What is happening? No. I got it. Rachel! No. I got it. Fuck, I got it. I can do it. Rachel! I fucking do it. Get off! Get off! I'm making it work! I will do it!
Okay. What do I do? Fuck.
Get out! Stop! Go around! Let me around! Grab my arm! Rachel,
You gotta stop fighting. Listen to me. You have to stop. Okay? Shh. Stop fighting. You'll see everything gets easier. Just let go. And let us help you. Okay? Breathe. Relax. Breathe. Exhale. Breathe. Breathe. Just let us help you, okay?
On 3. 1, 2, 3.
So that clip, it's intense, even knowing what happens, knowing where it's going. And I think it's very emblematic of kind of the promise of the premise. Obviously, writers are told when they're pitching or talking to a network or whatever, you have your comparables. Obviously, I'm sure people talk about Lost, or it's like Lord of the Flies. What would you say are the tropes that you tried to sidestep, or the things that you said to people who are trying to make it fit the box? No, it's not going to be this way, that kind of thing.
Well, just to distinguish it from Lost, I mean, we certainly did not want to incorporate any sense of the paranormal. And because this does live in the world of authenticity and trying to render both the island experience and the backstory experience with as much authenticity as possible. But we did, wanted to make sure that when we did lean into a trope, that we made it very much our own. Like when they built a shelter, it wasn't, thrown up casually or in the background. Like we made a moment of it, and we made this competition of it, and made it, infused it with this silliness, which then sort of descends into a real emotional conflicts between the characters. I think it was very much about making sure that we were asking what a 17-year-old, how they would handle the trope if they were to be confronted by it.
And were there, there's often people talking about, oh, we should have a young voice. We should have somebody who knows how teenagers speak. Tell us about what were your sort of requirements when you were putting together your writer's room? Who were you looking for, or what kind of voices, or what made somebody a slam dunk that you had to have?
Well, I always think of a writer's room as like a dinner party. You're not necessarily looking for like-minded people. You're looking for lots of different points of views and lots of different skill sets. Some writers are brilliant in the writer's room at coming up with story, and some writers are brilliant at dialogue or outrageous ideas, or, okay, the plot needs to be moved in this way. And so I say dinner party meets SWAT team. Like, you don't want 2 IT guys and 2 snipers. You want to sort of flesh it all out. I think for Sarah and for me, it's super important that we get the voices right. We talk to our friends who have kids that age. Sarah went to a Native American reservation and met with teenage girls to be sure she understood what that experience looked like. I have nieces and nephews who are of that age, so we would reach out. We would hire consultants to come in, whether it was a young person whose voice we felt like would help us nail down the sounds, or if it was a Native American consultant or for Gretchen, we talked to a sociologist to find out sort of what the process was, so that we were sort of, so in every way you kind of want to make it deeply authentic. And then I think something that's always important to me is that it also has as authentic and of the now as you want it to sound and feel. You also don't want 5 years from now for people to be like, I don't want to watch it because nothing sounds the same anymore. So it's sort of finding the universals, and then also on top of that, a sort of very modern present voice.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially in terms of often when you're writing about young people, when you have a show that is about teenage characters, they're just people. They're not, teenagers are, and this is a hard thing for people to process sometimes, they're not a different species. They are people. They feel the same way. They think the same things, which I think is why this show is so resonant for so many of us. And I want to go into specifics in a minute, specifically about the overt feminism of the show, which is absolutely amazing and everybody is delighted by. Did any of the characters surprise you through the writing of the show, through the room? Anybody that sort of became something that they maybe were not originally conceived as?
Yeah, personally speaking, I found Fatin to be the most surprising. I had this notion of her as, like, I mean, we always intended on layers in everyone. Like, people are so absurd, people are so surprising, and it's just, and they're miles deep. But in terms of Fatin, I actually didn't know how deep we would, like, when we would hit bedrock with her. But there was obviously, like, the just humor that is body and great and sharp and cutting and dirty. It's fantastic. But also the way that her steadiness created steadiness for the other characters. She became and is growing into this sort of de facto leader, not by any kind of power play, but just by the fact that she is like, she's not a reed in the storm. She is like firmly planted there, and other people who are not so steady can lean on her. And it's just, it's been something incredible to work with and discover.
Yeah, and there's certainly, there's certainly characters talking about putting together a writer's room with different perspectives. It's like when you bring in new ideas and voices, you really start, I mean, I don't think Sarah had thought about it entirely that Tony was going to be gay. And then when we started writing, one of our writers, a lesbian woman who is an athlete who played basketball, we really started to think about Tony in a different way, because we had a writer who had all these amazing stories and perspectives to bring. And that actually brought together sort of, I think, the great love story of the season, which is Tony and Shelby, which I think that to me is why television is the ultimate medium for me. That idea that you bring in these unbelievable talents and voices, and every layer makes it more interesting and better and more special and authentic, is thrilling.
That's the treat, right? To get to watch them grow and continue to live like real people. So obviously we're strongly in the corner of all of our girls. And I maybe also still have a soft spot for Gretchen, but I'm curious about some of her choices. In episode 3, one of the investigators says, "I don't want anything less than to sound condescending." But of course, that's exactly what he wants. Was it a conscious choice on Gretchen's part / your parts collectively to have the girls be interviewed by 2 men over all this time, their investigation? Is that an intentional procedure?
That was an intentional choice. I think that she wanted to reflect a certain reality, which is that authority figures can often be male and can often have that attitude of patronizing or talking down to. And she wanted to elicit really authentic responses. So it was wanting to reflect the world and also, I think probably a desire to for her own benefit, maybe to see the pushback. I think she gets a little bit of a rise every time she does see some pushback from these, young women against male figures. It's like, we are really evolving. We are, feeling our power. So there has to be a sense of like, God, yes, like I picked the right ones and they've really got metal. So I think she relishes that. She's sitting in her back room, perhaps having a martini and feeling really good about herself.
So she should. I mean, look, she's got extreme plans, but she's got plans.
Yes, I think Rachel Griffith says it very well. She says Gretchen cares more about humanity than humans. It's like, yeah, she's the greater good above it all. So that's how she can sort of plow through all the mistakes and terrible things that happen, because she's doing it for the greater good.
What we saw about her tells us a bit about how she got here, about her academic career and what happened to her son. Are there, without trying to press for anything we're not supposed to know, are there other elements in Gretchen's life or existence that got her to this place that we'll learn about, or should we feel free to speculate?
Well,
I think both.
Yeah. There's definitely the professional disgrace that she's had that has led her to want revenge, to get spurned from academia, has wounded her ego pretty dramatically. So she's eager to prove herself in this big way. So there's an ego-driven element to her big enterprise here. And not for nothing, but we do, it has long been a dream of mine to do a Gretchen's own teenage years flashback episode to show those foundational wounds that have formed this woman who has this ego, who is going to these extreme lengths, and so that is an ardent dream. To the degree that we'll be able to do that, TBD.
Well, I'm not trying to pitch you here in front of all these people, but I suspect it'd be exciting that some of those wounds are going to be the same ones as are, familiar to our girls, to our cast. I'm already saying I'm just fully taking possession.
That's good. That's what you want in a TV show, is for people to feel like it's theirs.
To that end, though, I am curious, the things that we find out about our castaways that they reveal to each other, are all of these things also already known to Gretchen and her research team, do you think, or does she experience some surprises during the course of them being stranded?
Amy, did you want to?
Oh, sure. I think she, based on their backstories, I think she did pick them. A lot of them came to her. We talk a little bit about the backstory of how these people come to her, whether it's a guidance counselor who felt like this person really needed help, or, that we saw in Leah's that the doctor says, I can get you a counselor, a therapist, for a psychiatrist for your daughter to talk to in the hospital. I imagine that's the person who put Gretchen in touch with Leah and her family. So I imagine she knows quite a bit. But there's always, of course, layers to, when they're going through Martha's material to figure out what they don't know. it's clear she knew that she was somehow a part of that case, but then the realization that she perjured herself is a little bit of a new piece of information for her. So I think she knows enough to know she's gotten people who are vulnerable and whose parents are deeply, we talked about this a lot, like wanting to make sure the parents who sent these kids away weren't just evil devils. They were actually desperate parents trying to figure out how to save their kids from things they couldn't cope with or understand. And Gretchen kind of uses those moments to bring them in. So I think she knows quite a bit, but she doesn't necessarily know everything.
Yeah.
Well, and sorry, Sarah, please go ahead.
And what she doesn't know, those sort of gaps in her knowledge could very well come back to bite her, for sure.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating take on the like troubled teen complex industry, which is another conversation for another time. But despite all of that, as you both pointed out, there are so many moments of humor and of joy. And we actually have a clip to take a look at. If we can roll that now, please.
I need these in my mouth right now.
Oh, Lord, a second miracle.
Those are so much better than hot Cheetos.
I got it.
All right, I'm not trying to start shit, but I bought those at the airport. I put them in my carry-on.
No way, I bought them at a mini mart in Richwood along with an orange fucking Gatorade like I always do.
She did, on our way to Fargo to catch our first plane.
Bam, where's your witness?
Hey, how about we just take a step back and get a good clear read of this situation?
The situation is that they're mine and anybody who tries to take him is a colonizer.
Okay, just listen up for a sec. We're all real sick of eating macadamia nuts, right? And here we have something that everybody wants with no surefire owner. So I say that we look at these Takis as a grand prize and we play for them.
Can't we just eat them?
Yeah, seriously, she's gone full youth group counselor on us.
Play what?
3 words. Shelter building contest.
No way!
We'll split it to 2 teams, right? And whoever builds the best, most durable one wins.
I'm out.
What?
How many times do I have to say it? I'm not trying to make myself at home here. I want to leave.
We won't survive without shelter, Rachel, and the universe has a wicked sense of humor. Rescue will probably show up as soon as we finish.
If you build it, they will come. Come on, Field of Dreams. It's like a brilliant film.
Come on, Rach.
Fuck it, I'll play.
All right then, let's do this.
Honestly, I think this is gonna be really fun.
That clip hits in a really particular way because Takis were only available in Canada relatively recently. So it felt like it was, directly into our souls. First of all, who was the genius who realized that they could all wear Fatten's clothes? Like, that's both story and production. We get to see glorious stuff all the time. Did you always know that was going to be the case?
Well, definitely when I chose to write Fatten's suitcase as the one that would arrive on the island, it was a wonderful thing for me to think about the sort of clothes horse, most fabulous person, having to supply everyone who would be more or less uncomfortable in a lot of her more outrageous looks. But then I think in the hands of our costume designer, he really made the most of it. Just a fantastic job of exploiting all of Fatten's outrageousness to make the others kind of have to look down at themselves and be like, never in a million years, but here we are.
It was just a constant treat. But back to
for us too, by the way, when Josh started revealing all the clothes that he wanted to put them in, we were like, just,
he was like, hear me out. Hoop earrings this big, and
we'd be like, all right, give it a whirl.
But to talk more broadly about the fun and the humor in the show, was there anyone or any debates or any times when you even had to remind yourselves that the show had room for both, that you could swing from the light to the dark, or was it a mandate to always have a fun scene after a couple of really dark ones, or how did that sort of check and balance work for you?
For me, it felt just utterly natural, a little bit just like the way an ocean's tides kind of come up and down, and a moon wanes and changes that. Like, as long as it was authentic, it was like, to me, the scenes were just people being people. So humor would pop up. And I think that's something that's very similar that Sarah, that we share, is a sensibility of the funny and the absurd in an experience. So we've certainly talked about, like, if we go this dark, can we still stay in the humor? So where's the line? But in terms of the scene to scene, I think it just sort of, the stories tell us where to go, or at least that's how I feel. Sarah may feel very differently.
I think, I mean, for me, it was really just a reflection of what I experienced as a teenager in high school. Like, humor was always the go-to to cope with what felt like horrors. I couldn't conceive of any other way of young women being together. Like, a humor had to be like the lubricant that like made them feel better, that made the ground kind of still under their feet rather than swirling and shaky. Like, I was in I ran cross country in high school, and like my first meet, I ran really hard. It was really hot, and I pissed my pants at the end of it, and I was mortified, like so mortified. And I thought, like, oh my God, this is just going to end my whole. I was a freshman, so very nervous. And I looked at another teammate, and she's like, "You pissed your pants?" Like, and we started laughing about it, and we became like a club, and we like initiated other people into the club. Like, you can really only like be a baller if you piss your pants after the race. Like, it became, it's just what felt like the end of the world because you were going to be stigmatized as someone who pissed their pants after cross country. Like, it became like such a wonderful, humorous, comfortable thing. And so, different situation, but on a deserted island, I can only imagine that these young women would be self-soothing by laughing, by trying to laugh and make each other laugh.
Well, and make each other laugh in particular. The other thing that I thought was so brilliant is that, in theory, on a desert island with a bunch of strangers, you could reinvent yourself. You could do whatever, be whatever, except that there's your sister or your best friend or whoever ready to roll their eyes and be like, as if you're not that. Can you please tell us a little bit about the choice to have each of them go in with somebody who is their ringer, who knows them, and how that kind of ratcheted the story along? From our perspective, I think the authenticity was so huge because nobody was, Martha's not going to let Tony get away with X, Y, or Z, although she lets her get away with a lot. Or, Shelby and Dot have preconceptions of one another, but they also have some pretty accurate conceptions at the same time. Tell us a bit about that choice to make them not utter strangers, or strangers to only 6 of the others, 7.
In the pilot process, I really just, I didn't want to start from zero necessarily in terms of the conflicts that were already moving when we landed on the island. And so to have a sisterly conflict between Nora and Rachel already brewing when we got there, we had an engine already. And then for the others, they knew enough about each other that they could keep them in check. Like, Tony, you're not, being you right now, or Shelby initially drives this wedge between Tony and Martha. It just gives you so much grist for the mill in terms of already having some friction or some angles to work with in terms of a storytelling process. So.
I think what Sarah did so brilliantly in the pilot and made look quite easy, which is not easy, is to deliver us 8 really distinct characters who are already mid conflict drama, to kind of think about all of those pieces as you're building it, very complicated, and so cleverly, efficiently, but still very richly developed. That to me is like, that is not an easy task what she did. It's a very, very complicated thing to kind of invest in 8 characters immediately, and then the smarts of how she set everybody into motion, really, really smart.
Were there ever times when it caused you problems, those pre-existing relationships, where you really wanted somebody to tell a lie, but knew that, you know, her sister, her best friend, whatever, would call her out? Or were there ever times when you're like, oh, right, they've known each other since birth, can't do that?
It was mostly opportunities, right?
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Just the idea that you tell a giant lie and your sister's looking at you and thinking, when are you telling people you were cut from the team and you're not an Olympic hopeful? I mean, all of those moments actually sort of became like wonderfully usable for us.
What was important, I think, was to situate every duo in a different relation to each other. You know, so you have 2 best friends, you have sisters, and Shelby and Dot were such an interesting, like, because they sort of knew each other and they actually didn't have any ill will toward each other at all, but there were these little moments of friction. You know, it was like Shelby is resenting Dot because she like is not pictured, and that screws up her yearbook aesthetics. Like, and that's just very real. But in high school, there are people in your life that you're like, they're not really on the map for me, but I actually love them, or they're not really on the map for me, but I don't have a great feeling about them. It felt very authentic to that experience.
I thought too that it gave us a real kind of scope of what is the size and breadth of those hometowns or those schools that Leah and Fatten, you know each other to see, but less about who they are. That Shelby and Dot have a working knowledge of the social circles or lack thereof of the others. It also clues us into what we need to know about those socioeconomic environments and the size of those schools. And it's a nice little piece of writing. It's really, really pleasing. So now I'm going to dig into some of these girls. I've discovered through the course of this conversation that when there are too many polite smiles, it means I'm walking too close to a place of spoilers. So we'll know that if there's a polite smile zone, we'll take a pause, we'll all nod, and we'll move on. But talking about sisters, I want to talk a little bit about the other operative. Obviously, once we hear that there's another operative, once Jeanette has left us, RIP Jeanette, it's set up so that we can and should suspect anyone. And of course we did. So the obligatory question, did you debate scenarios where it could have been anyone else? Was it anyone else? And then you switched at one point.
It was always smile. It was always Nora. It was always Nora. We flirted with a couple, but never seriously. I think
I think at one point we sort of thought, do we go to the most obvious person that everyone's like, it's obviously that person, so it isn't that person, so then we make it that person? Like, is it Dot or Shelby? That seems the most obvious. And then you've thrown the audience by giving, the sort of bachelorette of it all. Like,
right. The red herring
this way, and it's actually not a red herring, it's just the person. But yeah, we didn't ever sit for very long in those. It really always came back to Nora because she did it for all the right reasons, which made it very, I think, tragic and poignant and terrifying, because she was doing it to save her sister and hold that relationship together. And yet her discovery would obviously destroy that if her sister ever knew that.
I know that Sarah, you were talking about some IG lives and fan questions and things. Are there things that people point to in the show, either about the Nora reveal or anything else that you're surprised that they found, or that you never intended to be a clue that winds up resonating for people anyway?
Ooh, I mean, I don't know if I can pinpoint anything exactly. This is going to be so frustrating to the fandom whom I love, but I'm afraid of skirting too close to the things that have been very dead on because they're actually active going forward. I will say that there have been some eagle-eyed individuals who have pinpointed very interesting clues. I'm being cagey, and this is going to kind of crumble into nothingness, so I should probably stop myself. But people have noticed things. They're just active situations for season 2 that I can't speak to.
Somebody out there is onto something. That's what I got from that.
Absolutely. Yes.
I love
yes.
it.
That's
amazing. Okay. Can we roll our next clip, please?
Hustle and hard work. That's how you make your dreams come true. We grow up hearing that, don't we? That you don't have to be gifted or some kind of natural. If you just put in the time, the effort, and the sweat, anything is possible. I believed that because I had to. Only to find out it was a stone cold lie.
So I found that clip so interesting because we actually relatively rarely see this character on screen, meaning a hyper-professional teenager, a young woman who doesn't get waylaid by romance or a seedy industry. And you have a few characters who we don't often see. Were you consciously trying to point out, another is Fatten's first appearance on screen is going, oh, this is somebody who loves sex and is thrilled to love sex and is unapologetic about it. And, I think you could make a case for everybody, but Dot is another one that comes to mind. Were you looking specifically to highlight the types of teenage girls that we hadn't seen a lot or recently?
I don't think that was necessarily an intention that was like an explicit intention of mine. I created everyone either based on an aspect of myself or someone I knew in the world or had experiences with growing up or currently. And then really tried to sort of just position the best group that would have conflict and heart and cohesiveness, but also their own will. I like Rachel, for example, is very, I'm incredibly driven to the point of like letting my health and personal life slide a lot. And I just, wanted to capture that. The thing that I really hadn't often seen teenagers, young women together talking the way that I talked to my friends when I was that age, like very like smart, funny, open, weird, so weird. Like, I really think weird is normal. It's like, so I wanted to show all of these very unique individuals, but then when they got together, they would surprise each other. Like that's sort of the newness that I was seeking, was really showing individuals speaking in these like loose, human and odd, surprising ways. And that's how they kept themselves afloat.
And I wonder how, it seems to us, the viewers, that despite whatever they might try to do, and Leah really keeps her secret for a long time, that ultimately they all wind up being the people who they are, or the people who they are authentically on the inside. That even in this relatively, where there's more air, Nora still doesn't speak as much as many of the others. That kind of thing. Is that sort of the intent of is it your intent or is it Gretchen's intent, that not only will people on the island kind of create a new society, but that they will return to kind of the purest form of themselves?
I think people, like, when you're trying to survive, literally, which is what these girls are trying to do, you don't have a lot of room to kind of put up the fake layers. And so you just sort of have to be who you are. And I think one of the things, I had one of my best friends when we moved abroad for a semester in college, whose name was Debbie, decided to go by Deborah. And about 3 weeks in, she was like, this is ridiculous.
Who am I kidding? Yeah.
Who am I kidding? French Deborah is not happening. And I always remember that, because it's like you can try on a lot of different personas, but I think actually what the island is doing is providing these young women with, like, finding their authentic selves. And I think that will be an argument that Gretchen will make along the way as to, we talk about this a lot in the room. For a lot of these girls, their lives will be in some ways better. I mean, I certainly think for someone like Shelby, who was terrified of who she was and shamed of who she was and under the pressure of her parents, I think she will be better off for being given that freedom, but it doesn't kind of change who you are. It sort of reveals who you are, I think. And I think Nora is a quieter person by nature, and that continues to be the case. She's just maybe seen and known by more people than she would be in a larger environment.
And so basically what you're saying is, the experiences that are best for us are just going to be terribly traumatic and painful. That's where we're going. Got it.
I mean, I will say that I think the times in my life that I have, look, this is the scary thing about coming of age, is that it is life or death for some kids. Like, the feeling of, like, all the choices you're making are terrifying and feel like there are car accidents and drug overdoses, and there's a lot that happens during this time. But for the people who come out of it on the other side, it does have the sense of accomplishment and pride that, like, one of the things Sarah and I talk a lot about is, like, we hope this show is for people about resilience, like, how don't lose faith in yourself, how strong you can be, how you can get through different traumatic experiences, and that resilience is really beautiful. So
yeah,
I hate to say yes to that, but
yeah, that's not really at all. It's a little bit Gretchen's perspective, but that's certainly not. One would never wish this level of trauma on anyone, outside of Gretchen, but if you do sustain something really difficult such as this, and you have people with whom to process it, which these young women do, at time, and people who care in that way, that it can be revelatory in ways that it can reveal resources that you didn't know you had. So again, like, if it's in the right hands and it's being processed with care, then it can really open your eyes to certain strengths in yourself.
And much like adolescence, the only way out is through, right? You kind of can't get off the ride as much as you frequently want to. We're going to go to audience Q&As in just a couple minutes, which means I'm just going to now do a little bit of more overt spoiler digging. Obviously,
Lots
the
of polite
hints,
smiling coming.
a lot of polite smiling and just, nodding. The hint to us, or the clue to us at the end of season 1, is that there will be, or has been, or is currently another experiment, a simultaneous experiment using young men. What can you tell us?
Well, in order for Gretchen to prove her theory, this gynotopic vision of hers, which purports that women are inherently better at building community, she has to have a control group. She has to have a group of men, young men, to witness, to watch them and see how they travel through a similar environment. So obviously she has a rooting interest in the young women. So yeah, we will be seeing some of that. And I think, what's interesting is, to me, is that we've seen the young women deal with this. And I don't think it's that often. They're sort of the standard bearers, whatever we see the men do, it's going to be measured against women. A lot of times it's the other way around, sort of boys setting the pace, and then it's, oh, well, how are the women doing in comparison to them? And this time it's sort of the other way around. So I think it's going to be they're really sort of, the women are the lens through which we're going to be observing them.
I'm so delighted with that, because for all the reasons that I might have thought that that experiment was going on, I did not assign the probable causes academic rigor. So that's really exciting. And around that point, at the end of season 1, we are in 2, or at least 2, kind of parallel or semi-parallel timelines where our girls are both rescued and not rescued. And so are we going to see in season 2 the point where those timelines meet up? Or are we how much, when do we find out? Or I'll just say discuss again.
At some point we will definitely have those 2 timelines meet up. Exactly when that will be, I think hopefully it'll be fun for the audience to be on that ride with us as we land that. So it'll definitely happen.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Of course it will.
Sorry, that was an annoying answer.
It was perfect. The art of protecting your story is the most important. We are going to go to some audience questions now. So Daniela asks, did you expect to have such a positive response from the LGBT community? And was it important to cast queer actors to play queer characters, or did that happen coincidentally?
I was not anticipating it. I wasn't necessarily. I don't know about Amy, but the response level, it bowled me over. I think, and now it's become, I don't know, it's just the groundswell beneath the show, and it's the base of the fandom to whom I feel so grateful for. But for me, there were so many plates spinning in my head that I wanted to service and love and build every character and every relationship with the same level of care. So I didn't know that, Shelby and Tony coming together would necessarily, because my mind was everywhere. But the fact that they've given so many viewers the opportunity to identify with these characters, I'm really overwhelmed, actually, and I'm so grateful.
And I mean, that there can be multiple types of representation in any given show is the gift of kind of right now, right? That it's not the one person, that there can be many people, many types of people representing all kinds of characters that we haven't seen in relatively recent past even.
And I think that was really important to us, that we knew we were on a journey with Shelby that was very much about struggling with her sexuality, and how there are kids out there who are doing that every day. And then to have another character like Tony, who it's just a part of her everyday life and wasn't even really mentioned until we saw in her backstory her falling in love with Regan. It was very important for us to sort of show the varied ways that people find themselves.
Yeah, that Tony has a lot of problems, but struggling with her sexual identity is not one of them.
Exactly.
So Hal has asked, what are the challenges and or the easy things about filming in Australia for season 2?
Well, we haven't started filming yet, so I can't.
So you don't know.
So we don't know yet what the challenges are. I know that there's gorgeous beaches and fantastic crews, so I feel very excited about that. New Zealand was a spectacular place for us to film, with stunning locations and, again, a wonderful crew. I think if I had to guess what our challenges will be this year, it'll be similar to what it was last year, which are the elements, because we're not a set show. We don't sit on stages at a hospital or in a police department for very much of the time. We're out in forests and beaches, and the elements, and apparently everything in Australia wants to kill you. Is sort of, when you get here, they're like, oh yeah, there's spiders, there's snakes, there's sharks, everything wants to kill you. So I guess that'll be something that we'll be looking out for. But yeah, so far I think that's my concern, really. It's just making sure the elements don't get us.
Okay, and then there's a question from, I think it's Micaria, who asks, she says, the characters are so complex with different personalities that both clash and intertwine. I was wondering which of the characters were developed first. And Sarah, you said that some of them were pulled from your life in one way or another, but did anybody jump into your mind fully formed right away and then need kind of a counterpart, or who showed up first?
Yeah, well, Leah came first. She's an overthinker. She was also on the heels of this breakup, which was also my experience. And really, people have said it a million times, and they'll continue to say it a million times. This is not a new thought, but writing close to your own experience is really, it makes the writing feel very immediate, and it's easier to tap into that emotional vein that's, the real grist of feeling. Yeah, Leah came first because I wanted to tell a breakup story through the lens of a teenage girl. And then Tony kind of appeared second. I'm fascinated and adore characters who are sort of more baldly given to like showing anger. I'm always kind of restrained, but I just sort of worship that sort of personality. People who can like flip a table. I mean, obviously we hope that Tony has not hurt anybody in that environment, and she hasn't, she knows not to go that far. But that level of just looseness with your letting your anger show is really admirable to me, actually. So, and then just they appeared, it was really, I almost can't speak to the process. It was very much sort of, I don't want to use the word spiritual because that sounds kind of, I don't know, not me maybe, but it was sort of communing with some spirit world, almost seance style, and just trying to raise these characters. And I don't know, it's tough. It's tough.
I really like what you said about, you know, writing from the place of like true authenticity, not like writing from one's spirit, but like I always like the kind of idiom of specificity is universal. But I think one of the reasons that this is resonant is because, again, we don't always get to see female characters who are as angry as Tony, or we don't get to see an entire cast of people have gastro issues for an entire episode, you know, which is like, speaking of real and speaking of bonding, these are the things that happen, you know, that's certainly our dramatic and emotional experiences. So I think that's kind of a good note for people who are asking from a writing point of view or wanting to be writers. And we have a kind of a related question from Charmaine, who asks, as a creator, I think as both creators, how much of the audience's interest do you take into account when creating season 2? And I suspect that by interest, she means how much of the audience's preferences or, you know, ships or things of that nature.
For me, I try to really tune that out because when I worked on Sex and the City, people would come up and be very excited to talk about next season or what was going to happen. And what we kind of ended up doing is sort of just trying to write to the truth of whatever that first season before people knew, because I think we were just sort of in our own bubble, Sarah, the writers, working through stuff and finding things. And obviously it's thrilling for us that we have fans and that people want ideas and have points of view and are hopeful for certain people and angry at others. But I think, strangely, keeping people engaged is sort of just trying to figure out, okay, what would our characters that we've been building towards do in all these circumstances we're putting them in? So we obviously want our fans to love the show and come back and be excited, but sometimes what will actually make the most exciting twist for them might not be something they saw coming or wanted to see coming. So I try to just stay in a lane and not overthink it. I think I've seen when shows have sort of tried to overthink that, or it doesn't always serve the show. But knowing that we have a fan base that's so excited and thrilled that like, to me, what it really feels like is just massive pressure to deliver a season that they'd be excited about. The first season is the massive pressure of, will anybody care? And now it's like, we have to do right by these people who love the show. So that to me is where I'm thinking constantly, like, we just have to deliver a fantastic season for people.
Yeah. I see the hopes and dreams on Twitter, for example, and I take them in and I hold them very close to my heart, and then I have to sort of go to the writer's room and let them go. But when I do see that someone has asked for something that we're already doing, my heart sings. Like,
totally.
someone wanted a domestic Shoney scene, and we have them. So that makes me delighted.
A showrunner of mine used to say, you don't give them what they want, you give them what they need, which is great, but not always without the knowledge that it might hurt from time to time, right?
Yeah, to me, it's just, we have to deliver a season that they want to stay invested in.
We have a couple of questions just asking about how long did it take to write and outline the show, or specifically each episode. Maybe can you take us through a little bit of the production walkthrough, drafts and times and that kind of thing?
Sure. So on this show, in part because we are so far away from LA and our writer's room. And this year, obviously, we did it by Zoom, so it was slightly different because of the pandemic. But we do about a 20-week writer's room that's totally separate from production, where we break the stories for the episode. And I usually have a general calendar, which is like how many days I think it'll take to break each episode, which is sort of figure out. I like a very collaborative writer's room. We're all in it, talking, working through stuff, putting stuff on the boards, finding the arc of the season, and then starting to work on the episodes. I always have a schedule that has, I think, a certain number of days per episode that we're breaking, but it quickly kind of goes out the window. I think episodes take as long as they take. Sometimes they come flying, you know what the episode's about, so things kind of move quickly. And sometimes you're struggling to find your line. So I'm very forgiving of what that process, it is what it is. And there's no deadlines yet, which is the thrilling part. And then you assign an episode to, Sarah and I talk a lot about who we think should write the episode. Sometimes it's the character that's the backstory. And so it's somebody who has strong points of view or has lived through some of those experiences. Sometimes it's a complicated episode, and I'm like, that feels like Sarah's brain should be on that one full time. And then we break everything as a team. So they go off and do a beat sheet. Sarah and I work through that beat sheet with them. They go off and write an outline. We deliver that to the studio and network and get notes. Then that person goes off and writes the script. We give them notes. And then Sarah always does a pass on each episode. I usually do one that's a little bit more of a story-driven pass to make sure everything's sort of flowing. And then Sarah digs in and does that last pass before it goes into the studio and network. And that can take, and each one sort of takes a different amount of time. Some are a 5-day pass for her, and sometimes it's a 2-week pass. It just depends on, like right now we're in an episode where we're rethinking some things and tweaking. And then we go into production and start shooting.
Maybe you can quickly tell us how have you guys felt about Zoom rooms, as you know, having missed the writer's room?
Look, the good news is I think they actually still work. I feel very close. We brought in 3 new writers this year, in part because some of our writers were unavailable because the length of time and streaming means people go into other jobs. And we also wanted some male perspectives that we wanted for what would become the Boys Island. I feel very close to all the writers, the ones that were from last year and the ones, so there was an intimacy that came that I was shocked by, that I think I was thinking was going to be very awkward. There's an efficiency that comes with it. I could only do 2 hours before I was like, I gotta get off this computer and go to the ladies' room and have a snack. And so we did 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon every day. And if we needed to go longer, we did. But I tried to. It's exhausting, kind of. Your eyes start hurting. I was constantly like, is that person bored or not liking the story, or maybe just checking their emails? I don't know. And I would try to be checking in with everybody to make sure. You miss, one of the writers said, I just miss flopping onto someone's couch during a break, and then stories start coming up anyway. And then we suddenly have an idea that comes back into the room. And so there's a spontaneity, I think, that is missing. But I don't actually think it hurts story. I just think I missed being in a room with people and laughing and having those moments. So
yeah,
it works. It works. And I'm glad to know it exists, but I would like to maybe, I could see it where you do a couple days Zoom and then a couple days in the room, but I'd like to know how tall people are. We had a conversation right at the end where I was like, how tall is everybody? Like,
right. Everybody get up. Let's see. But yeah, that's been the surprise, I think, is that the work actually does kind of get done at the same time, but it's not as, it's a little less like summer camp. sadly,
More
for all
efficient,
of us.
less fun.
Yeah. Well, back to fun for our last question. I think we have talked about this a little bit, but Isabel wants to know. She's going in again to see what else we can sidle out of you guys. Have any fan theories that weren't previously thought of by the production or writing team made it into the show?
Into season 2.
I don't think so. Sarah, yes.
There's one that I actually wish we had incorporated. That's so good. Again, I can't say what it is.
Maybe you will.
After season 2, I will fully disclose. But there's one that someone pitched that's so smart that if that person's not in the writing game, they need to get themselves there now. They're clearly.
I can't wait. Now I really want to hear it.
Yeah, I know. Now I
talk to you about it.
Sarah, offline we'll be discussing.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous. But Sarah and Amy, you guys are hard at work. This is your work day. Thank you so much for having taken the time to really deep dive with us into the wilds. We are so appreciative. And I think there's so much more we could talk about. This show is rich and delicious and is continuing to spout conversations. And I'm going to be Twitter stalking you both later on to be like, and what about this? And what about that? Thank you both so much on behalf of VIFF and the Creator Talks for coming.
Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you so much for having us. This was really fun.
Thank you.